Hi, folks. My name is John Watson. I'm the founder of DLAC, which is the Community Advancing Digital Learning. I've been doing this, I've been in this field for a couple of decades now. Mickey, you and I go back quite a ways. Uh, DLAC is the community of people advancing digital learning because there's so many different types of school leaders, policymakers, parents, teachers, everybody across education. And when we think about digital learning, what the schools and programs that we have in mind, they're not united by technology as much as they're united by creative thinking and innovation. What these technologies are doing is primarily breaking down the barriers of time and space. You break down time and space by adding online courses and components and different opportunities to connect over the internet. So that's what all of the elements, all the people and schools and programs in our community have in common.
Well, it's a great lead into my next question, which is, as you know, I've been sort of trying to create this umbrella term called unconventional learning, which has under it online and blended learning that we've been working on for so long, but also homeschooling, road schooling, micro schools, and forms that probably are being invented now that we haven't even thought of yet. Say
Exactly.
a little bit more about how you see these things kind of relating to each other, and are they springing from some common cause or desire?
Yeah, absolutely. I love the term unconventional schooling. When you think about the history of the field that you and I have been in, if you think about Florida Virtual School, if you think about Connections Academy, if you think about others, well, they were the unconventional schools of the late 1990s, right? These days, schools and programs like that have been around for 25 years or longer in some cases. I'm still not sure I'd call them conventional. In a lot of ways, people are still discovering what schools and programs like that offer, whether they're fully online, whether they're an online course, a hybrid school, all those pieces. But I think what is now even more unconventional are the types of schools, teachers, parents that you're working with that you talk about in the book. That's what's unconventional now. But it's really continuation because it's a continuation of doing two things. One is identifying and serving the needs of students whose needs aren't being well served by traditional physical brick and mortar schools. We know that the types of schools that you look at in the book, as well as others, their enrollments are growing, and yet the large majority of students are still enrolled in a traditional brick and mortar school. So these movements, at least so far, aren't trying to serve the masses. They're trying to serve the students who haven't been well served by current offerings. In 2026, that is very often micro schools and hybrid schools, whereas in 1996, it might have been the students in Florida looking to take a single online course because they wanted to free some time up in their schedules. If that first piece is about identifying the students who are looking for something different, the second key component is looking for ways to flex time and space around student and family needs. In my mind, again, I go back to the idea that digital learning isn't about the technology per se. It's about how the technology allows a student to learn at different times and at different places. And if you're thinking about, let's say, a high school student, what that can mean is the student may be taking an online algebra class or health class, but maybe what that's doing is freeing up her time. So in the afternoon, she can go work at the vet's office where she wants to learn what being a vet is like. Well, if you're in a high school from 9 to 3 every day, you can't get to that vet's office until 4 o'clock, let's say, and they close at 5. That doesn't make for a great experience for that student. So that's just one example of how this time and space flexibility plays in to what students and parents want. Micro schools and the other forms of unconventional schooling that you're talking about, I think, are doing exactly that.
Well, that kind of leads me into a question about one of your favorite topics, I know, which is AI and what impact it's going to have on all the stuff that we do. I've been thinking a lot about what the potential impact of AI will be on the world of work and careers for young people that are going through school right now. And the example that you just mentioned made me think about, is part of the drive for unconventional education a different way of preparing students for a future that we don't quite understand what it's going to be yet? What are you thinking these days about what AI is going to do specifically for young people and work in the future, and then you can loop back around and say what that's going to do for education.
The first answer to my question, to any time anybody asks me what I think AI is going to do, is the honest answer is nobody knows. Nobody knows. I could give you an argument full of citations and smart people with PhDs, and then 15 minutes later, I could use AI and give you the exact opposite argument, equally cited, equally smart, experienced people. There's so many unknowns. There's so many unknowns. What I think is undoubtedly the case is it's going to look different. And I tend to believe it's going to look radically different. And the reason that I tend to think it's going to look radically different is because having lived through computers becoming ubiquitous, personal computers becoming ubiquitous, and then the internet and the World Wide Web and it getting into education and becoming much more common. I feel like this is the technology, AI, that is more comprehensive, more flexible, and stronger than all those other ones that came before. And that is both, that gives us reason to be very optimistic and rather scared about what that future is going to look like. And are our human systems going to be ready and able to keep up with those things? So let's talk about maybe the two sides of that, what the promise is and what the concern or what the peril is. On the positive side, and in the context of micro schools, and by the way, this applies to rural schools, this applies to anywhere where a student or a family might be trying to learn in a situation where an expert teacher or any teacher may not be readily available. AI plays that role. And in a sense, I think some of us may have in the past been a bit too bullish about what online courses and online content could do, talking about its ability to personalize learning and how everything was at the tip of our fingers and that sort of thing. You know, how many conference presentations have you been to where somebody would hold up an iPhone or a smartphone and say, it's all here. But it wasn't really, because the interface wasn't there. And now it is. It really is. To take an example outside of education, I may be the world's most incompetent person when it comes to fixing things around the house. I have gotten very slightly better at that with one simple trick, as they used to say on the internet, right? I hold up my phone, I take a picture, and I say, what do I do about this? And it tells me. So for instance, my wife and I were trying to figure out some hinges on a cabinet door, and I'm in there shining a flashlight, like, what are these things? What are they doing? And then I realized, okay, I'm just going to take a picture, and it tells me, this is the hinge, this is how it works. Here's the guide to it, you know, all those pieces. And the thing, this is not a common hinge, you know, and I've got example after example like that. So you take that and you apply it to education with all the caveats about hallucinations and having to check sources and all those things, which are true and will probably remain true for at least a little while longer. The ability for anybody to have a conversation with an AI on any topic, to me, it completely changes how we think about education. It completely changes how we think about work these days.
Right.
It used to be if I had a question about anything that I didn't know, I would either do a Google search first or I would call somebody smart like you. Now, I chat with my AI first. And then I go find somebody smart to talk to. But at that point, it's about saying, here's what I understand about this. Tell me where I'm right and where I'm wrong. And there's plenty of cases. Again, to be clear, I don't want to sound like AI is completely magical or 100% right or anything like that. It has its flaws, and we need to understand what those flaws are. But as a starting point, the not just the knowledge and data, but the quality of thinking there is really incredible. Which leads us back to, what do schools need to do? Schools need to prepare students for this world. I saw a note recently about a state that had some sort of task force looking at AI in education. One of the recommendations was every course should have an AI component. And I wrote to somebody and said, with all due respect, I think that's entirely the wrong
Mm,
conclusion.
mm,
I actually think if you think AI is that powerful, what you need to do is have a set of courses where AI isn't used at all. Because it's too easy for AI to become a crutch
mm,
and to replace key parts of the learning process. I think until a student understands how to learn on their own or with another human and without that AI piece, they can't know how best to use AI. And so I think those two things have to come together. It's different for people my age and even a little bit younger than me, who are old enough and far along enough in our careers that we've been writing for a long time and speaking and thinking. We have our thoughts, we have our styles, we have those things. I have no idea how you develop that as a 16-year-old, let alone a 6-year-old,
right,
if you're not
right,
doing that at times on your own. And
right.
on your own, with a paper book and with a human parent, teacher, advisor, mentor, all those pieces.
Mm, mm. So it's really interesting. Is all I keep thinking about your hinge example, and it's if you didn't know that it was a hinge, or you didn't know that that's how a door opens and shuts, and a number of other things that you know just from life experience, your that ability for that AI to have been helpful to you would have been really different and possibly not useful at all, really.
I'll give you another example. I had a little fix that I needed to make on my mountain bike, and uh, bicycles are the only thing that I have the slightest bit of mechanical ability with. And I took a but I was having a trouble on a very, very simple repair, and I took a picture and I did the same thing. What do I do here? I started to try to do what the AI told me to do, and I realized the AI got something completely backwards. And it was because I have some experience there that I was able to recognize that. And it's not always going to be the case, but by using AI and by also having times in the real world where we're not using AI, you develop an intuition about how to
Mm,
use AI correctly. And I love that term because I don't know exactly what that means, but I can't come up with a better word for it. It you have to develop this intuition, this sense of here's where it works, here's where it doesn't work. And you have to do that partially by using AI. And if you're a student, you need to do it partially by not using
by not using
AI.
it. Yeah. 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 Because I think like intuition, is that something that can be taught?
No, it's something that you have to
You have
experience.
to learn basically as
You
opposed to
have to
be taught.
learn.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, yes,
Huh.
yes. It's like one of the one of the things that my much of my life has made clear, that the saying is good judgment comes from experience. Experience comes from bad judgment. I had somebody quote that to me once after I had exhibited some very bad judgment.
So the bottom line is one of the dangers of overuse or over reliance on AI for young people and for students is it might not free them to make the mistakes that they need to make to develop good judgment in some ways, right?
Yes, and yes, absolutely. I think we want all students, I think we want all humans to retain an ability to think for themselves. And that means that we can't outsource all of our thinking to AI. Will give you another example. I write fairly often in various capacities. About a month ago, I decided I was relying on AI too much. And I
Hmm.
decided that I was going to, at times, write start to finish, no AI, zero, because I was feeling like I was using it too much as a crutch. Now, the interesting thing is, I am pretty certain that when I start with something that I write on my own, feed it into AI, and then massage it a little bit more, that is better than my original 99% of the time. But I still think there's something about going start to finish myself and forcing myself into that every so often that I think is really valuable.
Outside of AI, um, is there one thing in the education sphere in general that that worries you the most, and one thing that makes you the most hopeful?
The thing that worries me the most is that with we see the growth of, as you're writing about, you're the expert in this, micro schools and these other unconventional education components and options. I think it's I think these are very promising, and they're already very valuable. They're very promising for potentially happening at scale. The thing that worries me there's two parts that worry me about this. One is the possibility that this type of education, like so many things in our society, is going to get culturally coded as being conservative or liberal, which means that 40% of the population is going to hate it no matter which side it comes down on. And I do think that there are a number of people in the field who are clearly aware of this concern, and they're doing a pretty good job. It still concerns me because it's too easy for just about everything to fall into that. And we're in a world where it's in the interest of certain people to try to force that. They want that to happen because that's how they get eyeballs. The second thing that concerns me is, as we talked about earlier, even at this time when more students than ever are homeschooled, micro schools, charter schools, private schools, something other than traditional district schools, it is still the case that most students go to traditional district schools. And I'm deeply concerned that we are setting up a situation where, when we're publicly funding private providers and private schools, but at the same time not freeing up their public counterparts to compete, that we are creating separate and unequal systems. This isn't an argument to not fund those different approaches. This is an argument to truly free up the public side, the traditional districts, to be able to compete, to be able to do all the things that they need to do. They have, each side has some built-in advantages. And I don't even mean that so much from a purely competitive standpoint. I mean that from a standpoint of, there are certain students and families who are going to find that the micro school is ideal for them. Others at the other extreme might say that traditional school, the brick and mortar school in the traditional district, that's ideal for me. Maybe it's the charter school, maybe it's the private school. But there's got to be a fairly level playing field. And for policymakers to be freeing the constraints on the private side and funding them, while not freeing the constraints, while keeping the publics shackled in ways that are not appreciated, that puts us down the path where the students who have more affluent, more engaged parents are getting them into all these new options. The parents who don't have the time, the resources, or for whatever reason, have their children in what would potentially turn into substandard options. Again, not because there aren't great teachers, not because there aren't school leaders who care, but because it's really hard within the constraints of the public education system.
Interesting. So it's not just resources then. It's policy, it's requirements, it's potentially outmoded ways of measuring learning, for example, might be one of the constraints that would hold back creativity on the part of public school systems.
I may well have mentioned this to you at some point. I'm I feel so strongly about this. The thing that I see again and again, and I don't see anybody talking about, is the idea that all these other components, charter schools, private schools, micro schools, you get, and every other revenue-based organization on the planet, you get one more student, you make one more sale, you get one more whatever, you have that much marginal revenue to work with. That is not how, every time I dig into finances in a school run, in a district run online school, I've only found one where the answer was, oh yeah, I get that money. School leader
Hmm,
saying, I get that money.
hmm, hmm, hmm.
It goes back into the district coffers, and that leader,
D-
that school leader, now has to beg for the additional resources. And
right.
so this is the biggest problem, I think. This is the biggest single structural problem.
Huh. Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. All right. Well, let's end on one thing that makes you hopeful.
The thing that makes me hopeful is my counter to the concern of the type of movement that you're researching and chronicling becoming a culture war issue is that some of the bluest states in the country seem now to be getting on board. We talked about offline earlier, New York's governor now accepting the tax credit dollars. Uh, my Colorado governor, Jared Polis, Democrat, did the same. Uh, California has a surprising amount of very innovative policy and activity. Uh, I kind of feel like they do it almost, it's like under the table. They don't want to talk about it. Like the similarities between what some California charter schools are doing and some of the ESA providers,
Shocking, isn't it? It's like
shocking.
choose from this menu and we'll pay for it.
And the thing is, in my career, I've had countless times when I've said to somebody, "Wow, did you see this? Did you not? Do you know that about this?" And 99% of the time, it's like, "Yeah, how did you not know that?" In this case, whenever I say it, 9 times out of 10, people don't know it.
Right, right,
They
right.
don't recognize that this is happening, and it sort of goes back to the culture war stuff. I'm convinced that people in some red states don't want anybody to point out that they're doing something similar to California, and probably vice versa. But it is happening, and if two states as blue as New York and California and Colorado is solidly blue now, they're all seeing these issues and these opportunities, and maybe they have to call them some different things. But I think there's a possibility that this level of opportunity is really going to spread and truly become the norm.